Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Culp, the publisher and CEO at CUInsight.com. And joining me today is the president and CEO of the Defense Credit Union Council, Tony Hernandez. Tony, hi, how are you?
Good morning, Lauren. We're doing great here in our nation's capital.
Awesome. Well, it is so good to have you join me today for this interview. The 3 questions with Tony Hernandez. I'm personally really excited about this one. Although the circumstances could be better, the reason that we're doing the video, obviously, these are really difficult times for so many people. So let's dive right in. Tony, what is DCUC doing to support credit unions and their members right now?
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. Credit union advocacy is always our number one concern, particularly as a trade association. And then number two, keeping our lines of communication is critical, especially during a crisis like COVID-19.
Right.
But we're finding that we can accomplish both those objectives, even though we're working from home. So DCUC has been very involved in advocacy over the last month. At the end of February, right when COVID-19 was starting to make its appearance, we had just wrapped up our Defense Matters Forum here in DC, and that was in late February, and right after that, I had just concluded several congressional visits, sort of teeing up our legislative goals and objectives for 2020. But then once we started working from home, and in about mid-March, there seemed to be a void, and I think that was because a lot of folks, not just in credit unions, but all across the country, were just grappling with safety measures. Should they come into work? How do they do social distancing? Who comes in? Who doesn't come in? All that sort of stuff. And so we just noticed things kind of just got quiet for about a week while people were grappling with those issues. And then our advocacy efforts gained momentum on March 17th. And I would say that I don't like to use the word aggressive, so I'll just say DCUC has been and remains engaged in a very assertive campaign. So we started to, I saw a post by the NCUA on LinkedIn regarding their grant program for low-income credit unions. And one of our issues at Defense Matters Forum was on, including military members who use what they call APO or FPO addresses. Those are post office boxes. One is a Army post office and the other is a fleet post office. And so those are not currently allowed to be counted in the calculations for low-income designation. And we were told that the NCUA was close to releasing that. And so when I saw the link about apply for this NCUA grants to help get money out to needy, low-income households, I immediately thought, where is it at? And so we started engaging with the NCUA on that so that more members could apply to become LICUs, thus get the grants and the other benefits, and then in turn help their members. And that seemed like a very easy way to lead off. And so we're still working with NCUA on that, but we've been very engaged with them. And then we were among the first to write to Congress way back on March 20th. That sounds kind of funny, but that seems like a long time ago.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So way back on March 20th, we had urged both the House and the Senate to support bipartisan introduction of H.R. 2305. And that's legislation that exempts business loans made to veterans from the current business lending caps. And that's something we've been advocating for well over a year. It was introduced about a year ago in Congress. And so we thought, why not? Here's something else that's already made the hurdle and has already made it in a congressional language. And so we sent a letter to both the House and the Senate. And then as things sort of really started ramping up and we're looking at the magnitude of what's going on, DCUC, we decided to go ahead and write a letter to the same House and Senate members on March 30th. And that was for, all credit unions. I was asking Congress to do a temporary suspension of the member business lending caps so that credit unions that are making business loans could do more to help members.
Right.
And this was all before the Paycheck, protection program came in. And so we advocated for that early on, one of the early adopters. On April 2nd, if you remember, the CARES Act got signed on the 27th of March. It went live on April 3rd. On April 2nd, DCUC wrote a letter to Treasury and SBA on some of the credit union concerns with the Paycheck Protection Program that we'd been hearing from our members. And so we outlined a whole bunch of things, both to the Treasury Secretary and the administrator for the Small Business Administration, and just making our recommendations. And I believe we're being heard. I watched the secretary during the White House press briefings, and I can see some of those things coming. Although I'm waiting for credit unions to get a nod, because a lot of our members are becoming SBA providers. And then something else that happened that we were asked to write about, back on April 8th, we sent a letter to the Treasury Secretary and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development on the impact of 6 to 12-month forbearances on mortgage servicers. And a lot of our credit unions are mortgage servicers. And so, what we're finding is with the Ginnie Mae mortgage-backed security program, approved issuers who service these mortgage-backed securities are still required to remit the scheduled principal and interest payment to their investors. And so as people in the CARES Act are allowed to skip their payments without any recourse, that's going to create another liquidity crisis in our country. And so we just asked for there to be credit union representation on the task force. That if you were listening in yesterday's White House press briefing, the Treasury Secretary mentioned this task force. And so we're trying to get credit union representation to make sure that we heard. And that's just not with Ginnie Mae. That's Freddie, Fannie, USDA, and VA type loans as well. And so we're just concerned with that, keeping that. An interesting fact is we're monitoring reports that nearly 37% of military spouses report having lost their jobs over the last month. Because, while military is getting paid, a well-known fact is that military families supplement the income with the spouse income. So suddenly you can't make a car payment, or you can't make payment on your credit cards because everything else is taking hold. And there's about 28% of veterans that we're finding have also lost their jobs or had their hours reduced. And so that plays into all this loan, both the loans on the Paycheck Protection Program, but also on mortgages. And so we're very concerned about that. And then finally, on April 8th, the same day, we made a series of recommendations to the NCUA. We got a hold of Senator Crapo, the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee's call to NCUA and other federal regulators, asking for statutory recommendations that Congress could make. And so, we saw the letter, saw the letter from the chairman to the NCUA and the other regulators. And so we just provided our recommendations for NCUA to include. And that was pretty much the same thing I talked about before, which was a veteran business lending exemptions, temporary relief from the member business lending caps. We added exempt credit unions from Military Lending Act restrictions. We find that military aren't allowed to take out certain loans because of restrictions in the MLA, and that's not fair, especially during this time. And so we asked, I've been writing to Congress, been writing to CFP, writing to NCUA, is we need to take a look at this. And then I already mentioned the inclusion of the APO, FPO addresses. And then the last thing we recommended, and we're going to be writing another letter today, was allowing credit unions to borrow under the Paycheck Protection Program. All right. And so there's a bill that was introduced in Congress yesterday, HR 6475. And I don't have a title on that yet, but that will allow credit unions to receive Paycheck Protection Program loans under the definition of financial business in the SBA regulations. If you recall, DCUC and lots of other credit unions are very small businesses in and of themselves. Some have 10 employees or less that are also struggling during this time. And so, we understand that we want to participate in being a lender, but in some cases, credit unions also need to be a borrower to keep their employees paid as well, so that they can continue to provide financial services to our members. So we'll be sending that letter to Congress later on today. And I just gotta say, Lauren, we've been very busy.
I was gonna say, you all have been very busy.
Yeah, well, it's kept us energized, and united as a team. So I'm very proud of the work that the DCUC staff is accomplishing, not just on advocacy, but on a whole bunch of other stuff.
Right. Well, that's incredible to hear about all the work you're doing. It sounds like DCUC is really, in so many ways, forward thinking for credit unions and really anticipating these issues that military members, that credit unions who serve them, and credit unions in general really will need someone to be
Yeah,
advocating for. So great.
thanks.
Well, thinking ahead, how do you think that this whole coronavirus situation, there's so many far-reaching implications, and I know you're advocating for a lot of those. What do you think maybe the long-term impacts will be of this situation? How do you think this might affect credit unions in the way that we really do business in the long run?
Well, I think it'll make us, outside of, how do we protect our employees and our members when they come in to visit us, and how do we deal with some of the large things? But I think, and you know, I think during this crisis, I think it'll force and accelerate a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And I don't say that lightly. I just think it's, we were already on the roadway for a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and I just think the crisis will probably accelerate some of that. For the most part, and we get stories all the time. In fact, right before I came online with you, I was reading a whole bunch of stories about some of our member credit unions and other credit unions, the non-DCUC members. We're doing a fantastic job doing what they do best during financial hard times. Zero interest loans, skip payments, waiver of fees, and on and on and on. And these are things that we do, with just government shutdowns, things we do in a natural disaster. And so credit unions are great. But one thing I found, and I mentioned it earlier, when the lockdown started, a lot of everything sort of just got quiet for a while. I just think many were still trying to grapple with the crisis, trying to figure out how to work from home, and a lot of them can't take their computers home, and so they're dead in the water, right? At the same time, we're having a large volume of business loan applications come online because we got to do this. Yet we're at home, don't have computers, and in some cases, a lot of credit unions weren't structured or weren't on the right footing to take advantage of the Paycheck protection program to help their members. And so, there were very, very few that were SBA lenders at the outset.
Right.
I am very proud of those credit unions who persisted throughout the application process, even though Treasury and SBA, who are not traditionally known for their efficiency, but they went from March 27th go to an April 3rd rollout, and here we are on April 14th. And we're still building this Paycheck protection program as we go. And so I've been reading a couple stories. In fact, I got one from from Travis Credit Union out in California about some of the good that they're doing, and we're going to put that story on our social media. For those credit unions that do not or are unable to offer business loans, either they weren't staffed to do that, they don't have the technology, or are doing them all by paper or by hand, or don't have the capital, or in some cases, their boards can't get together to authorize them to do business loans because they're all in lockdown too. And so, people don't want to hear about excuses; they want to hear about results, right? And so, what we offered, or what DCUC did, is we highlighted an offer from one of our partners, StreetShares platform, and it's a veteran-owned company that's providing free technology using their staffing, and they allow co-branding so that credit unions don't have to turn away their members.
Wow.
Plus, they use their own capital sources to make loans. So this is like, really? I mean, I can send a member to someone else that assumes all the risk.
Right.
Makes the loans and has her own stuff. And last I heard from StreetShare's CEO, Mark Rockefeller, they were on their way to $3 billion.
Wow.
In a Paycheck protection plan loan. And so I'm not sure how many credit unions have since accepted the offer, but the benefits are huge, and it's still not too late to call StreetShares and get on the program. And so I'm just looking at, the question you asked was, how do I see this coming out? At some point, in the post-COVID-19 world, I think members are going to look and see who was able to offer help in a time of need,
right,
and who's not. And like I mentioned, there's a difference between offering excuses and getting results. And so I think a lot of people are going to ask me, what's my credit doing now in the post-COVID-19 world? Is it the same old, or have they adapted? Not just in terms of business lending, but in technology solutions, especially if we're staying home. Are they
Right.
keeping in communication with me? Is their service better or is it the same? And so how have they adapted to change? Many are going to have to fight to get their message out and show their value to their members. It's going to be uh, highly competitive, I believe, coming out of COVID-19.
Mm.
That's where DCUC will be making the difference. You know, we're going to be telling stories on Capitol Hill, inside the Pentagon, in the trade press. So we have a really good partnership with the CUInsight and also in influential circles or social circles here in Washington, D.C. and throughout our great country. And so that's something we're going to be focused on doing for our members.
That's amazing. Well, it's so great to hear about all of these options for credit unions. As you're right, as things are inevitably going to change and members are going to be asking, was my credit union here for me or were they not? And what kind of is their future relationship with that financial institution then?
Right.
So many good things there. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm curious too, how are you doing personally? What's been keeping you sane, or I like to say, are you are you staying sane during these really trying times?
I've been doing well. I mean, other than my hair getting long, coping with that. Like I said, things remain busy in terms of DCUC performing its advocacy role. You know, and then we're focused on doing the same thing, communicating our results
Right.
and providing a service. But not just advocacy. We've been highlighting success stories, helpful hints on wearing gloves and masks using the CDC guidelines, putting information out from a lot of the ATM providers and how you can use, a Q-tip so you don't have to touch the pin pads,
Right.
just helpful hints like that. And then recently, since April is Military Saves Month, and you can't do a lot of those activities, we're showing what NCUF is doing with the biz kids. We're highlighting what our credit unions are doing for school-age children. There's lots of great activities for parents to do with their kids to teach them how to count money, how to save money, how money works. And so, you can do coloring contests, you can do a whole bunch of fun stuff, at home. Me personally, I've gone a little bit old school. My wife bought me several 1,000 or 2,000 piece puzzles, and those keep me occupied. Um, I've reread a few books that have been sitting on my shelf. I've reacquainted myself with my Peloton.
Oh, I got a Peloton.
Those are those are great.
Right.
In fact, I did a 45-minute this morning. It was rough. And then I'm completing a few projects around the house. And later on today, I'll be building an outdoor swing since we're home and can enjoy some
Right.
nicer weather. Health-wise, I maintain social distancing. Only shop for groceries when we need to. Getting used to wearing a mask when I'm out. Take my
Right.
vitamins and my allergy meds, and then I stay hydrated. And so that's kind of how I'm doing from my perch here at my home during the stay-at-home order.
Wow. Well, it sounds like DCUC is keeping you, you guys are so busy that there's not that much downtime, it sounds like.
Yes,
But I love the puzzles. I've been trying to find a puzzle and they are sold out everywhere now. So good job. Good job, Jennifer, for getting you those early. Well, Tony, this has been such a pleasure. So great to hear about what DCUC is working on and all of the ways that the Defense Credit Union Council is really serving credit unions, serving military members, and making sure that we all as an industry are well advocated for. So thank you so much for all of the work that you do. So cool to hear. I have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I've got an upcoming article on CUInsight. Like I said, I've seen a few people in our industry, some in leadership positions that aren't coping well, in terms of decision making or crisis management or dealing with degraded communications. And so the article is titled 8 Techniques, when leading during a crisis. And that's based on some of my experiences as an Air Force crisis action team member working inside the Pentagon during 9/11. And also in my role as a disaster preparedness and emergency management director in my last job as a full colonel. And so I only want to say that it takes some experience and a lot of practice. And the process isn't always perfect, but to quote General George S. Patton, having a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. And so, yeah, I would just say, read the article on CUInsight, and I hope you can find a few nuggets that you can apply in this crisis and the next.
Amazing. Well, great words to end on. Thank you so much, Tony, for joining me. It was a real pleasure to hear all the things that BCUC is working on. I can't wait to read that article myself. So we'll link to it here in the post when this video goes live so that everyone, as the article is out, everyone can click to the post here and read that as well. Tony, thank you so much for your time. I hope you and Jennifer stay healthy and well. And we will hopefully see you in person someday soon.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Ellen.